if you think I'm going to dance around at the beginning of the Ellen video, you're wrong. I'm not going to do that. We're better than that, I think. Um, Ellen DeGeneres. Um, yeah, she's a pretty significant figure in the timeline of stand up that we're kind of looking at here. Um, just wanna I can't remember. I forget what I wrote in the description. So I will read that now. Uh, okay, yeah. All right. So basically, she's not the first woman to really break through, um, but she's one of the first. Like before Ellen, it was like, I mean, that really broke through. It was really like Phyllis Diller was like old school, and then like Joan Rivers was probably like the first sort of Carlin type, Carlin Pryor type. Phyllis Diller was just like yeah, just a joke teller. And there were some sprinkled in the 80s, Rita Rudner, Elaine Boozler, Paula Poundstone, but Ellen really sort of broke that mold, at least for women in the industry that had been to that point, you know, like many other industries, male dominated. Um, but Ellen is significant. I think she's way more significant for her stand up than her TV show. And I know now she's coming under all this criticisms. Like apparently she's an asshole now because she like was rude to some people. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen all those stories and rumors about she's an asshole, whatever. So there's I told you in the description about her TV show. If you didn't read that, it's really, I mean, uh, it's a cultural breakthrough, really, that happens, again, this is the late 90s. So, sexuality in culture was still like don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. In fact, it was in the middle of the whole Clinton don't ask, don't tell with the military and things like that. So it was a really big deal that she came out of the closet and that she came out of the closet in the way that she did, right? So publicly, right? On TV and in real life. Like they basically coincided. Um, and it eventually led to the cancellation of her show. It led to like when after she came out, her the episodes of her show that aired had like a parental advisory warning on them. It was like, just so you know, there's a gay person, right? Like in this show. Um, just really ignorant, sort of backwards shit that sounds like it's from the 50s, but it's from the late 90s, and you're like, oh, what is wrong with us, kind of thing. But this special that we watched was her first special coming back from the whole coming out fiasco, and um, so we kind of a bunch of you in your comments, you all hit on the whole, oh, she's very positive and she's very upbeat and uplifting. Like that's kind of the message, right? And she's not as deep, quote unquote, as the other, comedians that we've watched, less thought provoking. which I disagree with, by the way, um, and the whole female Seinfeld thing. And I would argue, yeah, I mentioned the female Seinfeld thing. It's in substance only, like her material is very similar, right? Very run of the mill, mundane stuff made funny, right? Did you ever notice the whole shampoo bit, right? Um, but she had this, like, Seinfeld never had a fuck it moment. Seinfeld just did comedy. He's the poster child for the '80s, right? He got he loved comedy. Started doing stand up. He got a TV show. Da da da. Um, Ellen kind of did the same thing, but with way less fanfare. Um, but she's wearing this badge of her sexuality that totally changes everything. That that changes all the comparisons to Seinfeld. Right? Seinfeld never really had to defend anything. White male, doing stand up is like, yeah, they're a dime a dozen. Um, so this special is sort of a result of Ellen's fuck it moment, right? She comes out of the closet, feels great, and then the media and the public just completely destroy her. And she starts doubting herself and all those kinds of things. And that was the whole interpretive dance opening. And like, Seinfeld never had to deal with that, you know. So Ellen, if you, depending on how you interpret the dance, um, that was her fuck it moment. She's like, I can be miserable and wallow in this and pity myself and all this kind of stuff. Oh, woe is me. Or I can say fuck it, and I can be myself and be proud to be myself and um, do my get back to work, like get back to doing my stand up. So it's just another comedian who had a fuck it moment and rose to it instead of shrinking from it. So the big like I said, you all made the Seinfeld connection, but none of you made the Cosby connection, which is not that, well, maybe she does, but not that she drugs people and that kind of thing. Um, she doesn't talk about her sexuality. Like that's what. So any of you in your comments who were like, yeah, she's not really talking about that much. It's that the deception, the sort of the not deception. It's it's the subtext. It's the undercurrent that you're not you might be thinking it, but you're not actively thinking it because she's not beating you over the head with it, right? We talked about Cosby. Cosby didn't talk about race at all. Why? Because everything he says has a racial undertone because we know he's black, right? So for I've often said, yeah, she's either the female Seinfeld or the gay Cosby. So the whole choice, like that interpretive dance opening, is her choosing not to talk about it, right? She doesn't owe that to anybody. Like, this is how she's going to do it. Now that she's out of the closet, everyone knows she's gay. Everything she says is an opinion of her community, right? Has become this sort of mouthpiece, whether she likes that or not. And her choice to not talk about it is is, I think, equally powerful than if she were talking about it as brazenly as, uh, Pryor talks about race or whatever it is, right? But she goes Cosby, in that to think that there's no content there that is related to her sexuality is to only scratch barely is to barely scratch the surface. So everything she says is this, and it's especially powerful or important for her community to do it this way, I think. Because what does it do? She does this interpretive dance. She doesn't come out and be like, you know, yeah, she doesn't come out on a soapbox and rant and rave about LGBTQ rights and like whatever it is. Does the interpretive dance, gets it out of the way. So now we're all on the same page. Immediately goes into the shampoo bit, which is like, it's this is a master class in normalizing homosexuality. Like, that's what I think became her mission, right? Now that she's gay, right, and out and everyone knows it, she's not going to change who she is to be some gay crusader or whatever. Or she's also not going to lean into the gayness to give people the type of gay that they want. If that makes any sense. We love to do that in our culture. It's like, we're okay, especially straight America or whatever. You know, we're okay with gayness to a point. If you're a gay male, you have to be like over the top, flamboyant, just a ridiculous stereotype. Then we'll sort of point and laugh and be like, oh, haha, that's not. Thank God that's not me. Um, but anything outside of that, we don't like it, right? Will and Grace is a perfect example. Like, everyone loved to laugh at Jack, Sean Hayes' character, but Will made people uncomfortable because you know we can't tell that he's gay unless he, all this other ignorant shit. So this this special, and Ellen really, from the time she came out or came back to performing, really like made it a point to be like, everyone knows I'm gay, so I'm just going to continue my life as it was, so that maybe the people who don't understand homosexuality or whatever will realize, oh, they're not any different than me in terms of what they do with their lives, what they do every day. They, you know, they shampoo, they shampoo their hair. They, go get cheese, like whatever bit you want to take out of there. Like, it normalizes. It has to normalize sexuality in some way, and highlights the fact that the only thing that separates me, Ryan Vaughn, from Ellen DeGeneres is who I like to fuck. Like, that's it. That's the only difference. They do all the same shit. They have all the same weird thoughts. They have, so, like, in choosing, like, I think that was such a huge choice that she had to make. Was, do I, do I, am I angry about this? Like, because she could be, like, am I angry? Am I fighting against this, or am I trying to have more people understand this, meaning her sexuality and her community? And that's why That's why she keeps it uplifting. You know, everybody in the Shruti, Matthew, Aaron, Sam, like pretty much everybody mentioned, oh, this is different than the rest of the stuff because it's lighter, it's uplifting, it's positive, it's look for happiness, look for the good in people, like things like that. True, right? But all of it is also in the she uses the Seinfeld approach of just like let's humor is in the universal, like things we all do and thoughts we all have, and she Cosby's it by not sort of framing it, every bit as now I'm gay, so this and that and the other, and shaking her fist at you or whatever it might be. Um, so yes, you guys all picked up on the Seinfeld part, but nobody really tapped into the Cosby part, and I think that's the most important part. I like Tyler. Tyler made the comment, and I'm sort of this was my takeaway from it. Um, I wrote it down here. There's an undercurrent of disappointment that good comedians uh, expose, if that makes any sense, or explore, right? That it's not just they're saying like many say that they're complicit in it, but it's sort of like the society culture has let us down. Like you, me, we're coming up short too, and you kind of Ellen has that in her um, in all her stuff, I think. Um, and again, like the late '90s was a time when people started to care about other people's sexuality. And I always ask that question, like, why do we care so much about sexuality? I don't get it. I really don't. Like, who cares who you like to fuck? I really don't care. And why should you care about that? But we do. Um, it's I don't know if it's worse or better since this whole Ellen thing. But before she came out, like, just from personal experience, like, I loved Ellen. Like, I've loved comedy for a long time, stand up. I used to have this show on PBS on Saturday nights at like 11 o'clock. And they just have, like three stand ups come up and do like 10 minutes or whatever. So since I was like 7 years old, I've been watching, and they had Ellen on all the time. I'm like, oh my God, like, she's so funny. And she had, you know, boobs, which I enjoyed. Like, as I got older, like, no, I mean, the whole gay thing never came into the equation. Um, and, this was across all different media um, platforms. Music, like Elton John, like, no one really, I mean, I think people knew he was gay, but no one really, he's like the gayest person ever, but it was never like a thing. Where I was like, oh, he's like, no one talked about it. George Michael, same thing. Like, it wasn't this big, it's not the only thing that people cared about, which is what it seems like things are now. But comedy, if you think about it, and I think Alan highlights it here, comedy is genderless, it's sexless, it's raceless, right? Like, when you tap into these universal things, like, that's what I think Ellen realized was like, comedy doesn't have comedy in and of itself doesn't have these biases. Um, so if I don't inject those biases into the material, maybe people will start to put two and two together and realize, like, oh, gay people aren't much different than me, or whatever Cosby saying black people aren't that much different than me. If I don't inject that into, like the way Murphy injects his race, like into it, um, and other comedians do. Um, I think that's like I always imagine like some, you know, some sort of some hillbilly like who loves the Ellen show, right? Or loves Ellen, but doesn't know that she's gay, and then finds out, right? You know, you can see, and maybe this is a a ridiculous dream, but like that someone like that would say, hey, that nice lady, you know, does the same stupid shit that I do. The nice gay lady does the same stupid shit that I do. Maybe I shouldn't lose my mind over the fact that she likes to have sex and relationships with women. Maybe that's not such a big deal, right? If you can make that connection, um, maybe that's just wishful thinking, right? Um, so, to all of you who made those comments about like Priscilla, you know, she takes a simple approach, very relatable approach. Like, yeah, I agree. Like, that's all part of not disguising the meaning or the depth, but just masking it. And I think hoping that the audience puts that puts it together, if that makes any sense. Logan brought up responsibility, relatability versus responsibility, like that kind of thing. And I've always said this. Maybe it's a little adjacent to that point, but entertainers, comedians, for the case of this course, they don't have a responsibility to, you know, do comedy with some depth and some import, but they have the opportunity to do it. So if you have the opportunity to do something like that, why would you not take it? Like, that's kind of always been my take on that. But I realize sometimes I'm on an island on some of this stuff. Yeah, so I talked about the normalizing sexuality by connecting it to just humanity, right? There's a lot of like that whole set. And then you see how important she is as a figure if you watched the special to the end where she kind of does a Q&A, and you know, the most of that audience, this was again like kind of like a this was kind of like a Pryor, right? Pryor's first performance back from um, his whole drug thing. This is Ellen's first performance back from coming out. So that particular audience was, there were a lot of LGBTQ people in the audience. That just seeing how important. I mean, I tear up every time. Every time I've seen it like 100 times. Very powerful. Like, she has, you know, she means something to not just these people, but hopefully more people than that. And I think it only takes the right mindset to get to that point, to see that she's trying to normalize sexuality by connecting it to humanity. Are we doing that? It's hard to say. I like to think um, that we are capable of that, but maybe not. I don't know. She talks about approval, Like she ties that into like a lot of her depression came from seeking approval from people, right? And she has that pretty good joke about the approval patch, right? Um, Releases doses of approval every hour or so, whatever it was. Like that's a good joke. But I've always said this too, like you'll never get 100% approval, so why seek any? Like I think that's a good way to live and sort of, you know, mitigate uh, depression and getting upset with yourself and getting bummed out by how people perceive you. It's just like nobody's gonna right. Assume no one's going to approve of what you do, and like who cares? Like, why seek any approval? Um, and some would say like Cosby, like Cosby took all that criticism for not talking about race. Like, but comedians, that's another beauty of the genre. They're not obligated to talk about anything they don't want to. And I think Ellen's choice here was the right one to not, you know, be this sort of gay crusader or whatever it is. Um, but she took a lot of criticism for that. You're not talking about LGBTQ issues enough. It's like she had said like I'm done with the approval thing, so that allows her to not talk about it and just sort of let people hopefully connect the dots. Um, but yeah, you're all right. A lot of comedy is dark, not just the comedians that we've been watching. And Ellen looks for the light, which is important. Um, let's see what else I got. That's about it. This, so that's uh, that's my take on Ellen. Hope you get something out of it. Think about it a little differently, and I'll be back